Okay, let me just. So we are very, very fortunate to have Dr. Maria Soto-Greene here today and Dr. Petros Levounis. For those of you who don't know, Dr. Maria Soto-Greene wears many, many hats. Her major hats include professor and executive vice dean at Rutgers, New Jersey Medical School. And as a clinical educator, initially Dr. Soto-Greene focused on the care of critically ill patients, honing in on the significance of the physician-patient communication and the impact on vulnerable patients and their loved ones. In her current role, she oversees all aspects of undergraduate medical education, including admissions, student affairs, education, as well as faculty affairs, professional development, accreditation, and diversity affairs. When do you sleep, Maria? Dr. Soto-Greene is committed to advancing the school's health equity and social justice education and community service. She has been a leader in disseminating best practices to other medical schools and received many awards for her exemplary contributions to promoting mentoring and social justice in medical education and health equity, and much more. Please join me in welcoming her and Dr. Levounis, who also wears many hats. His major hats include professor and chair of the Department of Psychiatry at Rutgers, New Jersey Medical School. He also serves as associate dean for professional development at Rutgers, New Jersey Medical School, and is the chief of service for University Hospital. Prior to coming to Rutgers, Dr. Levounis was at Columbia University, where he served as director of the Addiction Institute of New York from 2002 to 2013. He's written numerous articles, monographs, book chapters, lectured extensively on addiction topics throughout the US and abroad, has been interviewed on, I think, almost every major news channel. And Petros has also received multiple awards for his distinguished service and educator in psychiatry. So Maria and Petros together represent clinical educators who have a long-standing commitment, passion, and expertise for helping others, especially those who are most vulnerable, through mentorship and mental health services. So thank you for being here. Please say hello. And if you want to add anything else about yourself to say hello to the group, please do so.
Hello. Thank you for being here with us.
Hello, everyone. Thank you. And we're good to go.
Awesome. So I have to have this. And I'm going to switch gears. And we're going to do, Maria and Petros wanted to kickstart us off with a few Slido questions. We used Slido last time. The easiest way to do it is just grab your phone and go to slido.com. And before we jump in with our questions for them, they had a few questions for you. So just go to slido.com. Okay, so in Slido, what you're going to do, it looks like this is a screenshot. You're going to where it says enter code here, put in the digits 881468. And the first question should pop up. And the first question for you is what are some causes of burnout that come to mind for you? 881468. And that question should pop in. Go ahead and you can put more than one thing. What are some causes of burnout that come to mind for you? And I'll just read these off as you put them in. Work, lack of support, lack of sleep, doing too much, grading, increased responsibility, email, administrative, time away from family, lots of service, too many meetings, I'm with you there, stress, home life, overworked, stress again, short timelines, no sleep, stress, no sleep again, workload, lots of service, redoing form surveys that collect the same info, not enough hours in the day, juggling responsibilities, Meetings with 3 exclamation points, except for this one, of course. You obviously love being here in this hour, but okay. Grading overload, online meetings, sorry. Competition, all of the above. Too many responsibilities. I'll give you another few seconds to put in your responses. Anybody else? Being isolated, meetings with no tangible outcomes, family obligations, pressure to publish, everything is a priority, grading, meetings, student mentoring, emails, competing demands. These are good ones. Thank you for not holding back. Thank you for being honest. This is great. I'm going to go to our next question we have for you. And stay right there in Slido. It should pop right up. The question is, when thinking about wellness, what is something that requires low effort but high yield for you? Low effort, kind of low hanging fruit. Sleep, good one. Doesn't take much, but it results in some good wins. Sleep, 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 sitting in my backyard, walking with my dog. Taking a moment to step away, sleep and reading. Here comes the thunder. Tea time, yoga, self-care, grilling. Going to bed early, making time for myself. Coffee, yes, another coffee lover in the room. Silence, nature, sticking to a routine, setting an end hour to stop working. Sitting outside. Trash TV just a bit, chatting with a friend, daily walk, walking in the woods, Animal Crossing, being with family, turning off email, sleeping again. Sleep seems important here. Breathing, also important. Being understood, ignoring work emails on the weekends, Netflix, taking care of kids, ice cream, tea time, watching sitcoms. These are good ones. So these are small things that give you high results. Cooking, listening to music, connecting with friends and colleagues, reading fiction, cooking again. All right, we got some cooks in the room. Great. Thank you for that. So stay right there in Slido. We have one more question we want to ask you to get us going here. And the question is, what words would you use to describe the characteristics of a good mentor during this time? However you define good mentor during this time: understanding, listening, supportive, honest, advocate, non-judgmental, available, compassionate, empathy, flexible, openness, tolerant, active listener, patient, present, understanding, advocate, resourceful. This is great. Modeling self-care. Trying to find some new ones I didn't say yet. Listening, non-competitive, encouraging. These are great. Great. So as you know, with the word cloud, the words that are kind of coming up bigger here than some of the smaller words are words that are being repeated multiple times. So we see understanding, supportive, empathy. Those are big ones in terms of what comes to mind when you think of a good mentor during this time. Great. Thank you so much. Maria, Petros, does any of their responses surprise you?
I cannot say that they really surprised me, but certainly who helped me think about some of very important topics that they were brought up. And if I can just summarize some things, on the first question about causes of burnout, one of the things that popped up was unreasonable expectations. So essentially, we're talking about a discrepancy between what is asked of us and what we can deliver. And on the second question about wellness, a lot of the responses had to do with putting a bookend in our work. A lot of it had to do with sleep, but a lot of the other ones had to do with, okay, you know, stop answering emails over the weekend. Make sure that you have some boundaries in your work. And yet, in the third question, when we asked about what makes you into a good mentor, a lot of the things that came up had to do with accessibility and availability and being patient, which, if anything, require more work from us. So it was a perfect example to me of this crazy discrepancy between what we're expected to do and what actually is good for our own health. What I'm thinking here is that for the non-helping professions, so if you're out there in corporate America and business world, the outcome may very well be making more money. So when you limit your work, okay, you may be making less money, no big deal. But for us in the helping professions, for us in the teaching professions, when we ask somebody to do less work, it's not in a vacuum. When you put a bookend in your weekend, that does have a direct impact on, let's say, the availability and the accessibility that we all want from a good mentor. So boom, there's the clash. Yes, taking care of ourselves, but that has a direct impact on the people that we love to help. And yes, I know there are ways of actually educating our students not to call us on the weekend and not to email us on the weekend and so on. There are ways perhaps around it, but at the very core, whenever we try to limit our own work, we are very cognizant of the fact that this may very well have direct impact of how good a mentor we may very well be. So I saw this kind of clash right there in these responses.
Yeah, that's a really, really great observation, this discrepancy between what you're expected to do and then also prioritizing your own wellness. It's certainly a clash. So this really brings us to our first question, and maybe Maria, you would be willing to speak on it first, is what are some of the biggest challenges from your perspective, what you're hearing, observing, that faculty, postdocs, and medical students are facing right now related to their mental health and well-being?
I think what we experience, and I think Petros hit on that. So particularly in the medical education, right? When individuals enter it, and we could say the same thing for our our PhD students and our colleagues. There's a level of structure and predictability, right? That happens, and even when they're in unpredictable spaces, as they go into the more clinically intensive, they still had us to say, and now you'll go from here to there. When we disrupted that by saying we don't have all the answers for you, we did cause a lot of stress, right? And then at the same time on the faculty, we said, well, you know what? The students have to hit a pause, but you can't hit the same type of pause that we're expecting of everyone else. You now have to go into high gear, whether it's a clinically intensive individual or educational, right? And you now are thrust into being part of that change management and being maybe hitting those unreasonable expectations. I can tell you, working day and night to try to keep a system going for the care of others, right? And the care were not only the students, but then even saying, what's that tipping point for the faculty and others and our staff? And at what point, do we kind of strike a balance? So I think that that's what we did, and we did experience high levels of stress. They were very overt in the way people responded and their submission, because a lot of it went Zoom and you had chat functions and lists. and they could be themselves, and you're saying, whoa, I don't think I want to hear all this, so it proved to be, and then at the same time, we wanted to really say, what can we do to help take care of and manage the situation? But I think change was the big tipping point for all of us, and our responses to to be working in the unknown. I don't know, Petros, do you have thoughts? Because you and we had chatted.
Absolutely, we've been talking about these things. I very much like the point about the students being on pause, and yet the rest of us being expected not only to keep on going, but to double up our efforts in order to make some sense out of the educational plans for our students, for the welfare of our patients. Our patients became much more, demanding for the ones in the clinical world, of course. So from the point of view of the faculty, it was anything but pause. If anything, was tremendously much more work, and that took its toll. It's taking its toll as we speak.
Yeah, and I think a lot of what I'm hearing, and this kind of relates to our next question about burnout, is that's one of the biggest toll. It's taking its toll in the form of just complete burnout, burnout at a level that a lot of people haven't even experienced before. So what are the factors that contribute to burnout? I know we asked that question in the poll, and a lot of people put in some really, really good factors. And what are some useful strategies to get unburned, if that makes sense?
If I can just start here, Maria, the common theme to me behind this burnout, specifically in this COVID situation, is unpredictability. The unpredictable aspects of life in terms of traveling, in terms of working with our students, in terms of pretty much everything that we can think of. So unpredictability brings anxiety. Anxiety brings depression. Depression brings helplessness and hopelessness, and all these things eventually end up getting us down. So if we are going to look at the root cause of this, which is the unpredictability that I just described, maybe our best weapon against it is to try the best we can to make our own little lives as predictable as possible. Safeguarding our routines. See what is it that makes some kind of that brings some kind of sequence from one event to another in our everyday lives. Safeguard those. A lot of people brought up the issue of sleep. I liked particularly one that said going to bed earlier at night. It was very specific. As it turns out, waking up the same time every morning is actually more helpful than going to bed the same time every evening. But the effort is very well appreciated of doing something as specific as that to safeguard a routine in a person's life. And if your old routines no longer work because, I don't know, the gyms are closed or something like that happened, just devise some other kind of routine to take its place so that you can make your life as predictable as possible.
And I think that was something we focused on, was to really remind everyone that it was okay to check in with yourself, right? And one of the strategies from our faculty vitality teams, where we just came up with a slogan, that said, check you, check two, right? Check you as really check yourself, right? Kind of just, am I okay? And that's okay, the permission to focus on self, because, particularly in the type of profession that we're in a helping profession, I always say, who takes care of the healer? We're so focused on others, right? and that we don't check ourselves. And then just making an explicit, taking a moment on just initially in the initial crisis and the surge and our lives were disrupted, just taking a moment to just call on 2 other people, whether it was a text, a phone call, an email, and it was amazing on how that, and I see some of my colleagues who said on the Vitality Committee how much of a difference that made, right? That really did. It was like, I'm not in this alone, and and it helped with that kind of isolation, because our worlds were definitely disrupted. And I think we've known, and we have what we call tailor-made, and we allow each department to figure out what was the best strategy for that department based upon, right, the individuals that make up that specialty. So giving the permission to say, think about what are those, and that's why we asked you that question. What are some of those, low-lying fruit that we could take advantage? And I think you saw that we have it within us to take that time to keep ourselves well. We just don't always practice it, right? And a big thing is find that thing that you love and make that time for it, and forgive yourself for doing it, right? And I hate to even say the word forgive, because it was almost like, if you take the time out for you, somehow you're choice changing everyone else who's dependent on you, right? And we saw a number of the questions on our students, on your peers, on your other responsibilities. And I love the term, and I agree, unreasonable expectations. I think everything felt like unreasonable, even when it may have been somewhat. It's just why? Because there was so many things happening all at once. And I think that we just didn't need to tack something else on. But that's really, and I think I love, you all had a solution, right? You all had something that kept you. And so think about it. What is it that you yourself can do to prevent that circle, that cycle that, Petros talked about, and that trigger?
What's interesting about what Maria just said, if I can add something, there are data to support exactly what Maria said. There are studies that have been done now with patients who suffer from depression. And actually, during COVID, there was some relief from these depressive symptoms because of the sense of community, because of the sense we're all in it together, something horrible is happening out there, and I'm not alone. And that sense of belonging, that sense of being there with other humans did have a therapeutic effect for some really depressed, very depressed patients. So we know that works.
Thank you for sharing that. Petros, try to make our own little lives as predictable as possible. I wrote that down, this whole safeguarding our routines, trying to wake up at the same time each morning. It really is some of these just small little tips and tricks that can make such a big difference. Maria, this check you, check too, I love that. I'm gonna remember that. There's permission to focus on self. And your point about, based on just the group's polling, right? Like we often know within ourselves already what the answers are and what we need to do, but we have a difficult time prioritizing what we need, which kind of brings us to this third question of, we live in an always on workaholic culture where making time for rest can be really challenging for many people. How can we help normalize a culture where self-care, health, and wellness are prioritized?
I think I'm going to let Maria take the lead on that. This one has done so much work with wellness, with Chantal Brazeau and a number of other people as well. So
I think part of it is that we don't always practice what we preach. So we did create, and clearly now we, have all these peer support teams and different modalities. But I think what we really do also need to do is just to figure out how do we stop that cycle for ourselves, and maybe, right, our supervisors, I'm fortunate I only have just the dean as my immediate boss, but maybe having the conversation, right? Whether first with a peer, so that way you can figure out how do you have and exercise your voice of saying, you know what, I just need that moment, because I think what I am finding is that same supervisor probably needs that moment. It's just that they're lacking the insight, right? And so I think we just need to really talk it through in a thoughtful, respectful way to interrupt the cycle of allowing us to take off for a moment. And I know for myself, I failed miserably because everyone said, you're always a workaholic and we're going to depend on you even more. And I think I found myself almost feeling for the first time in a workaholic state of being almost falling off that cliff. And I said, wait, what's going to happen if I fall off the cliff? You know, let me figure out what strategies can I put in place. And it was really about distributing the workflow, but being careful and cognizant of all those I care for, right? And saying it's okay if we're in it together. And I think that really was very helpful to them to feel more engaged. And it was very helpful to me to say, okay, we're offloading each other, you know, and I see you and I value you, and what you're doing is so tremendously important. And I think that really built even a stronger sense of a community and support. So,
I
Petros.
remember, Maria, at the height of all this, at some point, you said, I cannot possibly work any harder. And I mean, I know you for 8 years now, and I know how hard you work, but I also know that you would never say such a thing. You know, it must have been that you crossed a mental line that was truly extraordinary for you to say to say these words. And I'm so glad you did, actually. But it did seem that you had crossed a line there.
I agree. And I think it helped me to say, wait a minute, I need a community. And they were there. So I think that sometimes we may believe that people are not there, and they'll do their best to whatever level they can. And I think that that's what we have to do, is to really look at that goodness and, you know, and create those judgment-free zones. I'm a big champion of it. And whatever you can do, I'm going to appreciate it. And then I'm going to try to see if I can help you get to a little bit higher, but try to do it in a way that it doesn't seem that it's unreasonable. But by me saying that, everyone paused and said, okay, we now need to be with you, right? And we all need to kind of share in that effort. And I think sometimes we don't know how to tell people that, and therefore they'll just let us stay on, I can tell you, until the battery runs out.
My recommendation here is twofold. One is exactly what Maria said in terms of a sense of belonging and a sense of community and a sense of connection with other human beings. The second part has everything to do with this. I mean, this here needs to be managed. So I don't know, every person has her or his own way of doing this. None of us has the answer to it, but this thing needs to somehow be contained, because it can ruin our lives. I don't have the real answer to it, but I do know it's a major problem. So we'll go from there. But by the way, I'm in an apocalyptic situation now.
Yes.
Here.
I was just going to say the same thing. If you keep hearing all these noises. Petros, I'm so glad that you mentioned this, and this being the cell phone, for those of you who maybe are driving or are not seeing the visuals here, but do you mind just kind of, can we go there for just a little bit longer? Can you share a little bit more about what your tips are and the importance of managing cell, you know, whether it's
there's some very basic things, like there's a world of difference between texting and emailing. Just somehow the culture of texting has the expectation that unless you're dead, you're going to be answering within a matter of seconds, while emailing does allow a little bit of space to even collect your thoughts before you can respond to someone. So I'm a very big fan of emailing over texting, although I realize how outdated I am with that. People, below the age of 150 just text, they don't email. And I realize that part, but it is a much more civilized way of communicating in my mind.
I want to say that with Petros, I totally agree, and I'm more likely. Again, I'm always on in part, but the texting with all these Zoom activities, I can't even get to the texting anyway, which is actually good because this way people then develop better habits of saying, you know what, if I really, really need her, I'll either pick up that phone and I'll at least hear the vibration, but we do need to manage it. Otherwise it'll manage us. And I'm sure there's some of you, I'm looking around, my generation, we didn't have this interconnectivity, right? And so we've kind of evolved into it. So I'm sure that we could figure out how to balance it a little bit better, right? And how to help others learn that balance about us, right?
Another thing that I do is I give out my home phone number very liberally. So if something is really that important, just call me at home. I do have a landline, and you're more than welcome to do so if it is really that important. It's the other thing as well. I mean, some of us have a family who lives very, very far away in different time zones, different parts of the globe. And so phone calls and texts and so on are somewhat jarring in terms of the immediacy and urgency of things with elderly parents and so on. So, people have to appreciate that angle as well.
Absolutely. And I want to read some of the comments in the chat. Somebody said, I removed work email notifications from my personal phone, and that has made a big difference for me and helped me with boundaries. And then someone else said, I worked with someone who texted me on a Saturday with a non-urgent question. I saw it and planned to respond with email Monday. Then they texted me again Sunday and said, did you get my text yesterday? I had to set that boundary after that, but the person pushes it a lot. And then one more person just jumped in and said that they set email auto reply over the weekends. That's a great idea. So thank you for that. And we have others who are texting in just different ideas related to strategies around monitoring and limiting phone time and interruptions. So thank you for that point. Such an important point. So I want to jump now and pivot a little bit to kind of mental health in the context of mentoring with this question of how can mentoring help decrease stress and prevent burnout?
Well, the great thing about mentoring is that it fills in a gap between, let's say, your supervisor who's responsible for your promotion and your evaluation and all that, and a friend who may or may not really have that kind of expertise in guiding you through your professional life. So as mentors, we live in this absolutely unique space that cannot be found anywhere else. So in that respect, we can reduce the anxiety of our mentees. We can make life somewhat more manageable for them. And of course, there is the danger of both bookends of this mentoring space that we occupy. There is the danger of veering more towards a supervisor or going more towards a friendship relationship. But if we know how to handle those boundaries of our space, we can offer something that is absolutely tremendously beneficial for the mental health of our mentees.
When Petros and I, we talked about this a little bit, and this is an interesting time now that we have to just have a heightened awareness of our roles as mentors, and also be cognizant of the impact of our words, right? You know, and right, Petros, and I think you kind of scaled it into saying, you know, mentor versus therapist, right? Because, you know, again, people are going to be accessing you in that mentorship role, but they may actually have needs, and we have to just really think about, you know, how we might support that, you know, in a, you know, in a thoughtful way. You know, I think confidentiality continues to be, right, a very important, and being judgment free, right? We saw that. And that's why I really appreciate a mentor, right? Was understanding was the big word, compassion, empathy, being there in that moment. Whereas you may need that moment. And I think the mentor has become even more valuable now, in that, you know, this is going to check you out from that supervisor, right? From the friend who's the peer, because you still hold that kind of that relationship. And I think, you know, I'm viewing whatever they're going to say and listen and react as very important to you. So I think you provide a safe space. And that's why it's really important that mentors really, you know, check themselves also, you know, and really have the kind of balance that may help their mentees. I don't know, Petros, what do you?
Well, I think it's a very, one of the of the participants here asked a very very important question. Said, often I counsel my students through their personal issues. How do I prep for that? And another one asked about how can I respectfully help a student who's struggling with depression. So there are some significant issues when you get to this. Some of the mentees who may very well respect you, have warm feelings towards you, and present some of their personal problems because they very genuinely and honestly think that you can help them, and maybe you can help them. But the mentorship relationship does not really allow for that, and it shouldn't allow for that. So the way that I address it is safety first, of course, safety first. If there's even a hint of suicidality or some kind of major safety issue, I have my ways of immediately calling for some help. And if it's not an urgent safety issue, I go more on a style of more superficial help, if I may say so. I don't go deep. I feel like I am in an emergency room and I only have a few minutes available for this kind of personal issues. So I do address them the best I can, and I just move on. So it is a very quick conversation, staying on the surface, acknowledging the patient's concern, and boom, let's move on to the work that is what we're here to do. Unless, of course, there's once again a safety issue where there's a switch to a very different intervention. But it's a real issue. I mean, mentees do bring up personal concerns.
Yeah, I was reading this article about like what role do we all need to play? You know, what have we learned through COVID? And it was saying how we all need to be CEOs, chief empathy officers, and that has stuck with me because it's kind of like, when in doubt, what can I do? I can be a CEO. I can listen. I can be available. I think all of you said, right, just this wanting a mentor who's understanding, supportive, empathy, like that's what's important during this time. And sometimes people just need to be heard and feel validated and affirmed. And I appreciate what you just shared, Petros, too, and also just kind of understanding, okay, what is the risk here? What's the safety thing? What's the safety issue? And we have various degrees of and levels of comfort, right, around having those kind of conversations with the mentees. So trusting your own, following your own lead, right? Like if you feel comfortable to have a conversation and to listen and to talk more about a personal thing, great, but not all of you do, and not all of you have that sense of comfort. So who can you refer them to, or how can you help them think through it in a way that feels right to you? So thank you for sharing that. I'd love to hear more on this next question about what aspects of mentoring partnerships contribute to good mental health? And do the benefits change depending on the type of mentorship relationship? For example, a mentee-mentor relationship versus a peer-to-peer relationship. What's the best way to maximize a mentoring partnership during these unprecedented times? I know there was a lot of questions in one, so you could start wherever you want.
I'm a little stuck with the compassionate presence that is brought up on the chat room here, and it's such a wonderful way of summarizing so many different concepts that I'm mesmerized by it. I haven't heard it that way before. I've heard presence, I've heard compassion, but not necessarily putting paired in this way before. It has echoes of first do no harm, of just being present there, not necessarily imposing your own thoughts and values over onto someone else, but at all times maintain an empathic and compassionate approach. I really am quite fond of the compassionate presence. And maybe that's at the core of this question that we're asking here about mentoring partnerships. Maybe the participants came to the answer before the experts did in this particular case. So I will stick with the compassionate presence, Maria.
I would agree with that, because I think whether it's, the traditional that we see versus peer-to-peer, I think that's what we're really offering right now to one another, is to just really be there, right, with our presence. And I think the questionnaire, again, if there's something that's disclosed and you're not comfortable, you shouldn't suddenly be put into this space, and you could say, you know what, I would feel best if, or there sometimes for us, there may be a policy that, right, that was evoked. We tell the person, look, I have a responsibility to move this in this direction. And you know what? Individuals understand when we do it. It's just how we do it. Don't put yourself in a situation of, then you don't know, then you're paralyzed. But if you ever get stuck, I'm sure there'll be someone that you could probably, pick up the phone and say, look, I'm stuck. I don't know, how to advise. But in general, I think both relationships are good. And if we can train our peer-to-peer as well as our mentors to really, that right now, this is that time to call on our empathy and our compassion and our presence, and our judgment-free zone. And through that, if you really listen well, then you can really guide, and what it is that the individual needs.
Yeah.
That's great. Joni, I don't know if it's okay to read yours out loud, and if you'd want to just share what you said. I think this is such an important point. Joni said, in terms of protecting our time as mentors, we're also modeling for mentees how to mentor. As they proceed in their careers, they become mentors too. If they see us as not keeping boundaries and protecting our time for our own work and family and self-care, they won't see a model for how to be a mentor and do the things we need to and want to do.
Very good point. Excellent point. Yeah. Absolutely.
Okay. So thank you so much for sharing that. We have our final question, and then we're going to wrap up. And this question is around, we kind of touched on it earlier, around the importance of cultivating a community. What impact does cultivating a community have on your mental health? And if you have any tips for how to do that for those who may feel kind of isolated right now, or feel maybe they don't have the kind of community they need right now. that would be great. So what impact does Cultivating Community have, and maybe any tips to get started?
Yeah. Well, one of my favorite AA sayings is that two people make a group. So by extending that one, two people make a community. And if it happens to be 3 people, so be it. If it happens to be 30 people, so be it. No preconceived notions here about what makes a community. There are sub cultures that people feel this kind of belonging. And sometimes it's a smaller one, and sometimes it's a much larger one. So opening up our understanding of community, I think it's hugely helpful. We did that with families. Some years ago, we're thinking about families as just being families of origin. LGBTQ, mental health really helped us open up the notion of family as families of community, families of choice, families of belonging. And so we have a much more varied sense of what it is that this essential component of humanity is all about.
And I think I saw, Lisa, you put nicely in the chat, we had occasional coffee breaks together on Zoom. So think about it, right? Don't always look at Zoom and say, oh no, not another meeting, but look at an opportunity, just to take a moment with someone else who may also be experiencing that loneliness, and what a difference you can really make in their lives, whether it's to say, you know what, I'm going to have a dinner break. Would you like to join me? Dinner. Of course, now as we open up, it'll be somewhat different, but I don't think we're going to get there as immediate with everyone. So invite someone to, and I saw this from my youngest son, in that, he couldn't attend his conference, and they had a wine break, and he's running around trying to figure out where we had something, and it was just, again, young people coming together, and they were going to do things that they normally might have done if they were in person. And I said, okay, that was interesting to me. And so learn to try something that you're not used to doing, and enjoy it with a colleague, and build that community, because we do need to move away from our isolation, get started small.
It so happened that very early in the pandemic, I had a virtual wedding and a virtual funeral that I attended. And both of them seemed to be so much more reasonable and rewarding and community building than I would have ever imagined. Last week, we had our virtual convocation here at the NJMS. It was an amazing event. I mean, it really was just so warm and so student-centered. Nobody would have thought that this kind of a convocation would have ever worked, and it did. So don't put I fully understand virtual meeting fatigue, and it did come up in one of our questions when people putting meetings with exclamation marks, but there are a lot of good things that have emerged from this virtual world.
And I'm looking again, more responses on how Zoom meetings have really led to reconnecting with old friends and planning a trip, right? With the excitement. So think about it. It may come to something that you hadn't thought of, but that really, really make you feel great. And that's what this is all about today.
Thank you so much for that. Yes, this two people makes a group thing. I love that. And rethinking how we use Zoom, or how we think or feel about Zoom. And I see Itza put in here too. So simple, but right, just checking in with each other, asking, how are you doing today? Or saying, I'm here for you, right? Just sometimes those reaching out in that way makes a big difference for people. So thank you so much, Petros, Maria. As we wrap up, I'm just gonna share my screen. I just wanna share a couple resources, and I'll also circulate this through email. There's Rutgers resources that I just wanna call your attention to, and I'm sure you all know about these already. There's kind of three main ones. One's through UHR, the University Human Resources Faculty Staff Assistance Program. They also, I don't know if you saw the email that came out yesterday about their wellness app. So I put a screenshot of it there. It was super easy to get into. You download the Rutgers app, and they have a whole area now on My Wellness. UBHC also has an employee assistance program, and I put the phone number there for you. And I'm sure all of you know about CAPS, which is in Student Affairs, Student Health. So these are the main ones I know of, but your schools and departments may have more at the kind of local level that if you don't know about, it would be good to reach out and find out about. And if you go on our the postdocs.rutgers.edu page, we also have external resources available. And these are also on the Graduate School for Applied Psychology website and some other UHR websites. So these are pretty standard external resources that are available outside of Rutgers, but available to everyone. So I will make sure to share those with you if you should need them or have a colleague or student that you think could use them. You can pass them along. So thank you so much. Just appreciate so much your time today. Stay safe in this thunderstorm that we're having, at least where I'm at. Stay dry and stay well.